Good afternoon. Welcome to ARDEX's Tile Tuesday. My name is Mark Pennine. I'm the Technical Manager for Tile and Stone Installation Systems. Today's webinar is why substrate preparation is critical for tile and stone installations. We will be focusing on horizontal applications and why self-leveling in particular is more important than ever for preparing floors for large format tile applications. Today, I'm accompanied by two of my colleagues, Field Marketing Specialist William White and Field Marketing Specialist Tim Aheimer. If you have any questions during the webinar, please type them in the chat. William and Tim will either answer those questions or present the questions to me. We will also be open for questions at the end of the webinar. Let's get started. Proper substrate preparation has long been an essential aspect to a successful tile or stone installation. But today's tile trends of large format tile, engaged porcelain tiles, and panels make flawless substrates even more critical. As in this picture, smaller tiles like 6x6 quarry tile, 8x8 tile, or even 12x12 porcelain allow for conforming to inconsistencies in substrates much easier. Massive gauge porcelain tile panels don't offer room for variances in the substrate and need a flatter, smoother substrate. Tolerances for these products are tighter. For instance, substrate's tolerance for tiles with all edges less than 15 inches in fascian dimension is 1/4 in 10 feet and a 1/16 in 12 inches. But for large format engaged porcelain tile panels, the tolerance is inverse to the size. The larger the tile, the less the acceptable tolerance. 1/8 of an inch in 10 feet and a 1/16 of an inch in 24 inches is the industry standard. Natural stone has always required more stringent surface flatness tolerances. Engaged porcelain panel recommendations are following those guidelines. Some facial dimensions of these large panels can reach 5 feet wide by 12 feet long. Installing large format tile is much more manageable and stress-free when self-leveling has been done ahead of time. Gauge porcelain panels installed on a properly prepared substrate results in a beautiful, clean installation with a monolithic look. There's no room for shortcuts when preparing a substrate. When the job is well planned, substrates are prepared to industry guidelines, and the installation is performed by qualified labor, the result is a beautiful, long-lasting installation. Carefully evaluate floor before beginning installations and remember this phrase: prior proper planning prevents painfully poor production. By following proper prep guidelines, you will maximize long-term performance while reducing installation cost. And you will minimize costly callbacks and enhance your reputation as a quality installer. The 5 keys to a successful installation are: attend training, get that education. Substrate preparation, it's always at the top of the list. You have to use the right tools. Use your resources, and always use trial and error. Preparing the substrate according to the ANSI A108.01 general requirements mandate that the substrate must be clean, structurally sound, and solidly bonded, free of bond breakers, flat and smooth, and free of excess movement. Soft or weak top layers pose problems in structural integrity and bonding and must be removed to achieve a strong, lasting bond. The most effective way to remove a weak top layer or contamination from concrete is by mechanical means. When mechanically preparing a substrate, be sure to use proper tools and protective equipment. For concrete substrate, always mechanically remove release agents, paint, drywall mud, sweeping compounds, oil, grease, asphalt, or tar. As a previous tile installer myself, I don't remember a new construction job that I ever went on site to prepare a tile installation and did not have some type of contamination on the floor. Typically, it's usually overspray of paint or at least drywall mud. Make sure these contaminations are properly removed before starting your installation. How do we treat concrete? For varnished concrete where no curing compounds have been used and superficial contaminations have been removed, you can use the appropriate primer to prepare the substrate. For acrylic non-dissipating curing compounds, they must be verified as acrylic. No mechanical prep is necessary, but you must remove any superficial contamination and choose the proper primer. When dealing with sealing compounds on concrete, you must be able to determine what type of sealer was used and how to proceed before priming. An acrylic or an epoxy compound, you want to remove superficial contaminants. For urethane compounds, you want to remove down to clean, absorbent concrete. Again, acrylic non-dissipating curing compounds must be defined as acrylic. There's no mechanical prep necessary, but you still must remove that superficial contaminants and prime as necessary. Sweeping compounds you may encounter at construction sites commonly use wax or a petroleum-based product. They can leave a bond-breaking residue on the concrete surface and must be removed. Also, tilt-up wall construction utilizes release agents to prevent the concrete wall from sticking to the slab, and those act as bond breakers. They must be mechanically removed before proceeding. If there is a material on the concrete that will affect the bond and you can't identify it, err on the side of caution and mechanically remove it. You can only remove adhesive residues on concrete. The adhesive must be scraped on to a well-bonded thin layer, almost like a residue or a stain on the surface. But if the adhesive is water soluble, it must be completely mechanically removed before proceeding. Do not use adhesive removers or solvents, since these will then become bond breakers. If your substrate is plywood, you cannot remove the adhesive residue and then install. You must remove the plywood itself or install another layer of plywood or cement board on top. When preparing exterior grade plywood to receive self-leveling compounds, always prepare the joints with a skim patch like ARDEX SKM, vacuum dust or debris, and then prime as required. Priming is a critical step before self-leveling, since primers prevent porous substrates from drawing moisture out of the product. It also enhances the bond and extends the working times of the self-leveling product. They are also bonding agents and will help setting materials bond to certain non-porous surfaces that otherwise would struggle to bond on their own. Primers will usually be single component acrylic or a two-part epoxy. Check with your local ARDEX sales rep for the appropriate primer for your installation. Installing over existing tile installations is becoming more popular since it eliminates costly tear-outs and health risks from the resulting dust. Be sure to investigate primers that are designed for non-porous surfaces, especially when tiling over existing tile, and make sure existing tile and stone, which will become your substrate, is well bonded. Another step you may need is to take or strip all waxes and allow the surface to dry thoroughly. Be sure to consult with your ARDEX rep to determine the suitable substrate and best product recommendations, and prime as necessary with the product designed for the porosity of your substrate. In most cases, for non-porous substrates, ARDEX P4 will be the primer of choice. For over exterior grade plywood, here is an example of how we install the ARDEX P51 primer undiluted right out of the bottle. You want to use a stiff bristle broom to apply the product to the surface. You want to scrub that primer into the surface, making sure you're achieving a good bond. This allows any dust or light contamination that may be laying on the surface to be incorporated in that primer and scrubbed into the substrate, so the primer is not laying on top of that dust. Do not make the mistake of thinking that self-leveling products are structural repair products. They're not. They are surface repair products that prepare the substrate for the installation of finished flooring. But the substrate itself must be structurally sound. If structural repairs are needed, be sure to consult an engineer. In most cases, flat and smooth is required, but level is not always needed. If level is required, be sure the floor is plotted and leveling pins are installed. Then pour sufficient material to achieve level. Sometimes a trial grade patch is all that is needed. Other times, patching will take place before self-leveling to fix minor cracks or spalls in the concrete. Figure out if you need 1/8 of an inch or less to remedy the out of plane substrate. If it's less than 1/8 of an inch, use a trial grade product on smaller jobs, and for larger jobs, use a high flow self-leveling underlayment or patch. If your substrate is more than 1/8 of an inch out of grade, use a self-leveling underlayment. Self-leveling underlayments have exceptionally high flow and will heal even when installed at thin applications. Do you need a slope? If the slope is greater than 2%, use a trowel grade material, and use a self-leveler if less than 2% slope is needed. Know your self-leveler. They're not all the same. Some may be limited to certain types of substrates, or limited to thicknesses, or even take longer to dry. Use the product recommended for your application. Again, consult ARDEX Technical or your local ARDEX sales pro. Self-leveling is ideal for flattening and smoothing large areas. Some floors may require 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch. Others may require 1/2 of an inch all the way up to 1.5 inches. Always use the proper product for the application. Self-leveling for tile and stone installations can help save time and money by speeding up installation and minimizing effort and repairs due to undulating and uneven surfaces. Most self-leveling underlayments can be walked on as soon as 3 to 4 hours, allowing the installer to start their layouts. Troweling can usually occur in 6 hours. And since self-leveling underlayments are very flowable, be sure to close off all openings and gaps before you begin pouring. Another option is to caulk the perimeter before installing your self-leveling underlayment. There are many options for doing this. In some cases, if you don't have an old tube of caulk, you can use blue tape, duct tape, anything that you can use that will seal off the bottom, spray foam to make sure that self-leveling product doesn't get underneath that drywall. Because if you are on the second floor, in which most cases you are going over a plywood substrate, that self-leveling underlayment will find its way downstairs if all the gaps and holes are not sealed properly. Some essential tools make self-leveling easier and more efficient. Two popular tools designed to place and break the surface tension when using self-levelers are the spreader. There's cleats on the bottom that allow for adjustments to determine how much material is applied to the floor, and the spike roller that helps break the surface tension. Self-levelers are the best way to encapsulate in-floor heating wires. Once the self-leveler has cured, the installer can work on the floor without worrying about damaging the heating wires. And gypsum-based self-leveling underlayments are ideal for hydronic heat tubing. An undulated floor covered with cement board is still an undulated floor. A self-leveling underlayment offers a bondable surface and a flat and smooth finish. Self-leveling underlayments have come a long way. The first self-leveler was introduced to the market in 1978. Today, there are a range of application devices, pumps, and up-to-date technology that provide easier workability. For small jobs, you can use manual barrel mixing. It is very important to measure the water capacity and to use proper tools to be sure the right amount of water is added every time. Additional tools and resources help the job run smoothly, such as a cart for the mixing barrel, a spike roller to break surface tension, and of course, a dust control system, as well as leveling pegs. For larger jobs, new technologies range from portable small capacity pumps to medium capacity pumps that are modular or trailer mounted. A high capacity pump is perfect for the urban application. Evaluate your needs to choose the appropriate pump for your application. ARDEX has a ARDEFLOW AMP 100 pump that can pump 70 to 200 bags per hour. It can pump 60 feet vertical and 200 feet horizontal. The mid-capacity pump has a hopper capacity of 7,500 pounds. It can pump anywhere from 15,000 to 24,000 pounds an hour, 150 feet vertical and 400 feet horizontal. And then we have our high capacity. It's a self-contained mobile unit with a silo capacity of 22,000 pounds. It can pump 600 feet horizontal. If you have a large project in an office building or a high-end apartment building, please consult with your ARDEX sales professional to see what you need and how you can get the power flow to your job site. Self-leveling can help in achieving a beautiful, long-lasting tile installation. Let's take a closer look at some of the ARDEX self-leveling options. ARDEX liquid backer board self-leveling underlayment. ARDEX liquid backer board was developed for the North American market, where homes are built with plywood floors. There's no lath mesh or additives required. You can use liquid backer board on both exterior grade plywood as well as concrete surfaces. So if you have two of those same surfaces in the same home, you don't have to use two different products. You can use the same product for both applications. You can walk on liquid backer board in 3 hours and install tile as soon as 6 hours. Liquid backer board gets great coverage, 65 square feet at 1/8 of an inch or 32.5 at 1/4 of an inch. So as you can see, when the liquid backer board's poured out, it has very high flow. You want to work it around the registers, heating ducts, or any plumbing with a hand spreader, and then you're ready to use the spreader to move the product around the room, get it into place. Always use soccer cleats or baseball cleats with the plastic bottom. You want to be able to get into the material, walk into the material. The material will heal as you walk right underneath your feet. You can break the surface tension with either the smoother, which is being used in this video, or you can use the spike roller. ARDEX TL2000 is a fiber reinforced self-leveling underlayment. This is a smooth and flat, low prep product that has great strength. This product is specifically recommended for distressed gypsum or over wood. It can be used over concrete, above grade, and VCT. It's fiber reinforced, and it also does not require the addition of lath mesh like the LBB. It has great coverage, 50 square feet at 1/8 or 25 square feet at 1/4. Tile can be installed as early as 6 hours, and other floor coverings as little as 24 hours. As you can see, the high flow of the TL2000 pours out, moves around the floor very easily. You just push it into place with the spreader. And then spread it across the floor to make your product consistent across the floor as needed. Again, you'll break the surface tension with the smoother or a spike roller. For use over interior concrete, tile, and terrazzo substrates, we recommend ARDEX TL1400. It's a high flow, cement-based self-leveling underlayment where you can install tile and stone in as early as 6 hours and other floor coverings in 24 hours. Gets 25 square feet at 1/4 inch. The TL1400 is a product great for large areas, great for large commercial tile projects. If you're doing a shopping mall or an office building entranceway over concrete, and you're looking for a very good product to get you a nice flat smooth surface, ARDEX TL1400 is the product for your solution. Again, spike rollers will help break the surface tension. For tile installers, a spike roller is what I would always recommend. No need to use a spreader. If you need to get in and use a hand trowel, you can do that as well. When value is of the essence, ARDEX TL1000 self-leveling underlayment is a high performance product for a smooth and flat surface as well. You can walk on it in 4 to 5 hours, so it's going to take a little bit longer for it to set up, but you can still install tile anywhere between 6 to 8 hours. Other floor coverings are going to take a little bit longer, 1 to 3 days, but it still gets great coverage, 25 square feet at 1/4 inch. So again, if you are in a situation where you're bidding a job and you have to bring your numbers in at a tight spec, but you still want the performance of a good product, ARDEX TL1000 is that product for your application. So final considerations. Substrate prep is always the key to a tile and stone installation success. There's always a right way solution. Stay in tune with your industry trends and best practices. Be aware of inherent challenges and always use your resources. Check your industry guidelines. Call your manufacturing technical service department. The ARDEX technical department is always answering phones and are available to answer your questions. Always reach out to your ARDEX sales rep. Now we would like to take any questions you may have. Tim and William, do you see any questions?
What is the average square foot cost for a fiber reinforced underlayment?
Well, unfortunately, I'm the technical manager, so I don't have the answer to that question. Go ahead, William.
It would probably be best to reach out to your local tile and stone sales rep, and they can help you factor that price for a local price with, and then help you figure out an installation cost at the same time.
Okay. Any other questions? Please type in any questions. We're here to answer your questions today.
So Mark, earlier in the presentation, we had a question on how deep can a self-leveling underlayment be poured to?
So yeah, that's a really good question. So the products, they differ, but most of them can go to at least 1.25 inches. Some can go to 1.5 inches. And even some of these products can be extended with pea gravel up to 2 inches when necessary. So if you have a belly in the floor or you have a bird bath and you don't want to waste all that self-leveling to fill that low area, you can first do a deep pour by adding pea gravel, let that cure overnight, come back, reprime, and then cap it with neat material.
So Mark, we have another question with regards to which products require primer versus those that do not?
Another really good question. So most self-leveling underlayments require primers, and the primer is determined by the substrate and the porosity of that substrate. But ARDEX does make one product, it's called ARDEX K60, that does not require priming. It doesn't require water to be mixed with the product. It comes with a jug of acrylic and a bag of cement. That is the only product that we recommend installing without the addition of priming. In most cases, I will say priming is necessary.
So we have another question, Mark. Can we get a self-leveler to go over a backer board, like a tile backer board?
Of course, backer boards that are typically made out of cement or some type of cementitious product will allow a self-leveler to bond to it. Unfortunately, because of all the seams, because backer boards are typically 3 feet by 5 feet, if those seams are not addressed properly with fiberglass mesh tape and so forth, there is a chance of cracking at all of those seams. So we don't recommend installing self-leveling over cement board. And the best way that I would describe it is, why would you go through all the cost and installation time and energy of installing cement board to have to pour self-leveling over top of it? Always take a look at your existing substrate, determine what you need, and use that self-leveling product before you would install cement board. Once you do your self-leveling, that's all you will typically need. You may choose to add a crack isolation membrane or an uncoupling membrane, or even if you want heat, like the FlexBone heat, you could add that. But there's no way, or there's no situation where you would want to actually install both cement board and self-leveling.
Thank you, Mark. That was a great explanation. We did have a question about a particular, sorry, I have to go back a second here, about a barrier 1, which to my understanding is like a lithium type sealer curing compound. Is there a particular primer that should be used with that, or how should a slab that has a curing compound be addressed?
Okay, so we always want to try to find out what kind of compound, curing compound was used. Can we find out that information? Can we get a technical data sheet on that product so we can find out the makeup of that product? If we know it's barrier 1 or some of these other moisture cure products that we're familiar with, we typically do have recommendations for certain primers. We always would recommend doing a drop test with water to see the porosity of the concrete. And then that will also help us decide what primer we would typically use. So we may, in some cases, recommend P82 or P4 over that if it's non-porous, or if that's curing compound is dissipated, we just may want to make sure any contamination is mechanically removed, and you can either install P51, a 1-to-1, or maybe 3-to-1, then 1-to-1, depending on the porosity of that surface.
Awesome, thank you, Mark. We do have a question about TL1000 or TL1400, and I guess this could actually be applied to all of the self-leveling underlayments being used in colder and or warmer climates of the country. And can you talk about how that would affect a self-leveling underlayment's performance?
Yeah, absolutely. So self-leveling underlayments are fairly new to the tile industry. They've been around for a long time, but tile installers are just realizing the need for self-leveling products. So the best way that I would describe cold and warm temperatures is very similar to how we treat our mortars that we use to install our tile. We want to make sure that our bags are put into a nice cold, dry area. They're stored, they're not left in the van in the middle of the summertime so they heat up, or they're not out in the freezing cold. And then when you're ready to install, if you're working in the summer on a very hot day and the AC system is not on, you can add bags of ice to your water to cool that water down to allow that self-leveling product to mix, pour, and heal properly. I will say that for colder temperatures, the main restriction on colder temperatures is the surface temperature and the ambient air temperature. It must be at least 50 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the main concern with colder temperatures.
That was an excellent explanation, Mark. I really like the similarity to, you know, how we think about mortars in hot and cold weather is the same way to think about, you know, an SLU in a hot and cold weather. So we have another question. What type of moisture testing should be performed prior to installing an SLU with an on-grade slab? And then does that, you know, I guess the second part of that would be, does moisture, high moisture levels affect a self-leveling underlayment?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because most tile installers don't have or has historically have dealt with high RH in the slab. So we have to do relative humidity testing. And we do that by placing RH probes in the concrete. It is important to determine the relative humidity or the moisture content in a slab when pouring a self-leveling compound. But you have to also realize that the moisture will dissipate up through most self-leveling products, and they will dissipate up and evaporate through the grout joints. Where this is becoming more of a concern with tile installations are the super format or gauge porcelain tile installations, where those porcelain panels are so large and now we have very narrow joints. So that's not allowing enough space for that dissipation or evaporation of that moisture from that slab. So doing RH testing is very important when you're going to be doing these gauge porcelain tile panel installations, and it may be advantageous to use a moisture control product if you find out you do have high moisture content in a slab before a tile installation.
Perfect. Thank you, Mark. Is the primary function of an SLU to create an even surface for tile, or does this function as a waterproofing membrane as well?
So self-leveling underlayments are created to flatten and smooth floors as well as level floors when necessary and when the proper steps are taken. They are not also anti-fracture membranes. They are not waterproofing membranes. They are basically an underlayment, and that is the purpose of these products.
Perfect. So a waterproofing can be applied
On top.
above it.
Correct.
Or a moisture control system can be installed below it, depending on if there's moisture coming from below or moisture from above.
Correct.
So another great question. Do you have to observe concrete control and or expansion joints? How do you treat them?
So for control joints, you can patch them with a ARDEX SKM patching material, and you can pour over them. All expansion joints, any movement joints like perimeter joints or isolation joints, they must be honored up through the self-leveling product. An easy way to do that is to put a couple nails at each end of that expansion joint, pour over it, and then chalk a line between the two nails and cut it out with a grinder.
And then that expansion joint would be honored all the way up to the tile work, correct?
Correct. Yep.
So we have a question about doing multiple lifts over a self-leveling underlayment. If we can, how long do we need to wait for the second lift? And do we need to reprime? So it's kind of a three-part question for you, Mark.
Yeah. So again, not all self-leveling products are the same. So you have to use a product that will allow you to extend it with pea gravel. In most cases, you can extend the product with pea gravel and then come back the next day, and yes, you have to reprime, and then you can cap it. In some instances, depending on the product being used, you may have to mat test that pour with pea gravel first to wait for it to dry before repriming and repouring. All the products are different. Make sure you read the technical data sheets to determine the wait time in between your finish cap over your deep pour.
Perfect. Thank you, Mark. And it looks like we have one final question. Do you need a vapor barrier over an SLU before installing something like an LVT finished floor?
Well, so that's an interesting question. So again, if it's above grade, no, you typically do not need a vapor barrier on top of an SLU. And if you're on grade or below grade, you're going to want to do your moisture control or vapor barrier first And that will typically be either an epoxy moisture control product or a urethane moisture control product. And then you would pour your self-leveling product, and then you can install your floor finish.
Perfect. Thanks, Mark.
Mm-hmm.
Looks like we're fairly caught up on questions.
Okay, so I want to thank everyone for taking their time today to join us for our first broadcast of Technical Tuesday. We will be back in 2 weeks for our next Tile and Stone webinar, and it's going to be on, I believe it's on waterproofing. So please come back in 2 weeks and join us for the waterproofing membrane. Thank you again and have a good day.